Sergeant Olivia Morgan had always been the smallest person in the room. At 5'2" and barely 110 pounds, she'd spent her entire life being underestimated, overlooked, and outright dismissed. But what most people failed to notice about Olivia weren't the physical attributes that made her stand out. It was the quiet determination burning behind her hazel eyes. A determination that had carried her through West Point, through Ranger School, and now to the Special Operations Tactical Shooting Program, where she stood among the most elite marksmen in the U.S. military. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The briefing room at Fort Benning's Advanced Marksmanship Training Center hummed with the familiar energy of alpha personalities. 32 shooters from various branches of the military filled the sterile space, their tactical uniforms bearing patches from Special Forces, MARSOC, SEAL teams, and other elite units. The overhead screens displayed the parameters for Operation Precision Response, the military's most prestigious shooting competition and training exercise. Olivia sat in her usual spot, back row corner, notebook open, pen ready. She preferred to observe before engaging, a habit that had served her well throughout her career. Around her, muscled men with tactical beards exchanged war stories and compared custom modifications to their favorite weapons. No one spoke to her. Few even acknowledged her presence. Master Sergeant James Wilson strode to the front of the room, his presence commanding immediate silence. A former Delta operator with combat deployments across 3 continents, Wilson had a reputation for brutal honesty and an almost supernatural ability with firearms. His eyes swept the room like a predator sizing up prey. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Hell Week," Wilson announced, his voice carrying that distinctive gravel that comes from years of shouting commands in combat zones. 32 of you are here. By Friday, only 12 will qualify for the Precision Response Team. The rest of you can go back to your units and tell them how close you got. A few nervous chuckles rippled through the crowd. Olivia didn't smile. She'd studied the qualification parameters, memorized the ballistic tables, and practiced malfunction drills until her fingers bled. This wasn't just another competition. It was a career-defining opportunity. "Each of you will rotate through 5 weapon systems," Wilson continued, pointing to the main screen. M4A1 carbine, M110 semi-automatic sniper system, MK48 machine gun, M9 Beretta, and, for you special snowflakes, unknown weapons you've never handled before. The screen changed to show a leaderboard. Scores are cumulative across all platforms. Miss a qualification on any weapon, you're done. Perform in the bottom 20% on any day, you're done. Questions? A hand shot up from the front row. "Sir, what's the passing score for each qualification?" Wilson's mouth twisted into what might have been a smile on someone less intimidating. "There isn't one, Captain. You're competing against each other, not a standard. Only the best advance." More hands raised, but Wilson was already moving on. "Primary shooting assignments. First rotation starting 0600 tomorrow. Team Alpha, lanes 1 through 8. He began reading names and shooters stood as they were called, moving to collect their assignment packets. Olivia waited, listening as Wilson worked through teams Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie. By the time he reached Team Delta, the final group, only 5 shooters remained uncalled, Olivia among them. Team Delta, lanes 25 through 32. Staff Sergeant Miller, Gunnery Sergeant Peterson, Lieutenant Commander Hayes, Captain Ramirez. Wilson paused, his eyes finding Olivia in the back row. Something like confusion or perhaps amusement flickered across his face. And Sergeant Morgan. Olivia stood to collect her packet. As she approached the front, she felt the weight of every gaze in the room. A few whispered comments reached her ears. Is she lost? Must be some kind of diversity quota. Wonder which general's daughter she is. Wilson handed her the packet with a neutral expression. Sergeant Morgan, your file says you qualified expert on all standard Army weapon platforms. Yes, Master Sergeant. Expert doesn't cut it here, he said, just loud enough for nearby shooters to hear. We're looking for exceptional. Olivia met his gaze directly. Understood, Master Sergeant. As she turned to go, she heard Wilson address the room again.
Tomorrow's primary qualification will be with the M4A1 carbine at ranges from 25 to 500 meters, standard and non-standard positions.
No optics beyond ACOG. Study your wind charts. The room began to empty as shooters collected their materials and headed out to prepare. Olivia moved quietly toward the exit, already reviewing the course requirements in her mind. As she reached the door, she felt a presence beside her. Sergeant Morgan, right? It was Captain Ramirez from her assigned team. He was studying her with the calculation of someone trying to determine if she would be a liability. "Yes, sir," she replied. "First time at Precision Response?" "Yes, sir." He nodded slowly. "Word of advice, don't let him get in your head. Half this competition is mental." Before she could respond, another voice cut in. "Ramirez, you adopting strays now?" It was Gunnery Sergeant Peterson, the Marine from their team. He looked Olivia up and down with unconcealed skepticism. "No offense, Sergeant, but this isn't basic qualification. This is advanced tactical shooting. Upper body strength matters." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Olivia had heard variations of this comment throughout her career. She'd long ago learned that responding defensively only confirmed their biases. Instead, she nodded politely. "Appreciate the concern, Gunny. See you on the range." She walked away, leaving Peterson staring after her. Outside, the Georgia humidity hit like a physical wall. The training complex sprawled before her, firing ranges stretching to the horizon, obstacle courses, shoot houses, and urban combat simulators. Her assigned barracks was a quarter-mile away, giving her time to process what she'd just experienced. By the time she reached her quarters, a Spartan room with a single bed, desk, and footlocker, Olivia had already compartmentalized the dismissive attitudes. They weren't new. They weren't unique, and most importantly, they weren't relevant to her performance. She unpacked methodically, laying out her equipment with precision. From a specialized case, she removed her personal shooting journal. 6 years of meticulously recorded data on every weapon she'd ever fired. Wind conditions, temperature, humidity, elevation, ammunition type, point of impact variations. Some called her obsessive. She called it necessary. A knock at her door interrupted her preparations. She opened it to find Master Sergeant Wilson. "Sergeant Morgan," he said without preamble, "walk with me." They moved in silence across the compound toward the armory. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the training grounds. Other competitors were visible in the distance, some already running practice drills, others gathered in small groups discussing strategy. "Your file is unusual," Wilson finally said. "West Point graduate, Ranger qualified, deployed with 10th Mountain and 75th Ranger Regiment. Expert ratings across all weapons platforms." He paused. "And yet you're here as a sergeant when you should be a captain by now." It wasn't a question, but Olivia answered anyway. "I requested a lateral move to focus on tactical shooting, Master Sergeant. Command track wasn't where I could best serve." Wilson glanced at her. "That decision cost you rank." "Yes, Master Sergeant." "Why?" Olivia considered her response carefully. "Because I'm better with a weapon than I am at navigating politics." Something that might have been approval flickered across Wilson's face. They reached the armory, a reinforced building with armed guards at the entrance. Wilson nodded to the guards, who stepped aside. "Your team doesn't think you belong here," he said as they entered the climate-controlled interior. Racks of weapons lined the walls, everything from standard-issue M4s to specialized sniper systems and foreign weapons. "With respect, Master Sergeant, that's not unusual in my experience." Wilson stopped and turned to face her. "Let me be clear, Sergeant. I don't care about your size, your gender, or your popularity. I care about one thing. Can you put rounds on target consistently under stress?" "Yes, Master Sergeant, I can." Wilson studied her face, looking for any sign of uncertainty. Finding none, he nodded once. "Tomorrow will tell. Dismissed." Olivia returned to her quarters and spent the evening reviewing her notes on the M4 platform. She knew its quirks intimately. The slight right-hand drift after barrel heating, the optimal cleaning schedule, the precise tension needed on the buffer spring for consistent cycling. While others might rely on natural talent or brute strength, Olivia's advantage had always been preparation and technical knowledge.
Her alarm went off at 400, though she had been awake for 20 minutes already. By 4:45, she was at the range, an hour before the official start time. The Georgia morning was already warm, the air thick with humidity. The range stood empty except for two figures at the far end, Master Sergeant Wilson and Staff Sergeant Miller from her team, already running practice drills. Olivia selected a position at the opposite end, giving them space. She began her own warm-up routine, dry fire exercises to establish muscle memory, breathing control practice, and mental visualization of the course. She didn't need to actually fire the weapon yet. Her body already knew what to do. By 05:30, the range was filling with competitors. She felt the sideways glances, heard the murmured comments. Most were too professional to be openly dismissive, but the skepticism was palpable. Team Delta assembled at their designated firing positions, lanes 25 through 32, the least desirable positions, Olivia noted. The early morning sun would be directly in their eyes. "Morning, Mighty Mouse," Gunnery Sergeant Peterson said as he approached, using a nickname that was clearly not meant as a compliment. "Take it easy, Peterson. Maybe she's got hidden talents." Captain Ramirez, to his credit, said nothing, focusing instead on checking his weapon. Staff Sergeant Miller, who had already been practicing, merely nodded in acknowledgement of her presence. Olivia ignored the comments and continued her preparations. At exactly 0600, Master Sergeant Wilson's voice cut through the morning air via the range loudspeaker. "Shooters to the line. Stage 1, M4A1 qualification will commence in 2 minutes. 20 rounds, 4 positions, timed course of fire. Targets will appear at random distances between 25 and 200 meters." Olivia took her position, feeling the familiar calm settle over her. This was where she belonged. Everything else fell away. The targets, the weapon, her breathing. Nothing else mattered. "Shooters ready! Stand by!" A horn blared, and the first targets appeared downrange, silhouettes that popped up for mere seconds before dropping again. Olivia's world narrowed to her sights and the targets. 4 shots standing, transition to kneeling, 4 more shots, transition to sitting, 4 shots, transition to prone, 8 final shots. Each round found its mark with precision that came from thousands of hours of practice. When the horn sounded again, signaling the end of the stage, Olivia performed an immediate reload from muscle memory, even though the exercise was complete. Safety habits were ingrained too deeply to ignore. Around her, other shooters were doing the same, some faster, some slower. Peterson, 2 lanes down, was already boasting about his performance. 20 for 20, center mass, he announced to anyone listening, like shooting fish in a barrel. The range officers moved downrange to check targets and record scores. When they reached Olivia's position, the officer paused, recounting her target. "Problem, Sergeant?" Wilson had materialized behind them. "No, Master Sergeant," the officer replied. "Just confirming. 20 hits, all in the 5-point zone. Perfect score." Wilson's expression didn't change, but he studied Olivia's target for a moment longer than necessary. "Proceed to Stage 2, he ordered. Stage 2 increased the difficulty, moving targets at distances from 200 to 300 meters. Stage 3 added environmental challenges, smoke obscuring the targets, wind flags indicating 15 to 20 mile-per-hour crosswinds. Stage 4 required shooting from unstable platforms designed to simulate different field conditions. By Stage 5, the final challenge of the day, only the truly exceptional shooters could maintain their accuracy, engaging multiple targets while moving through an obstacle course with simulated incoming fire in the form of paintball rounds that the shooters had to avoid. Throughout the day, competitors were eliminated as their scores fell into the bottom percentile. With each stage, Olivia watched the skepticism around her gradually transform into reluctant acknowledgement. She wasn't just keeping up, she was excelling. As the sun began to set, Master Sergeant Wilson called the remaining shooters to the center of the range. 28 remained from the original 32, a better retention rate than usual for the first day. Day 1 scores are posted, Wilson announced, gesturing to a digital leaderboard that had been set up near the range office. Bottom 4 are eliminated. Remember, tomorrow we move to the M110 sniper system. Longer ranges, higher precision requirements. Study your data books. Dismissed.
The shooters moved toward the leaderboard in groups, anxiety and anticipation visible on their faces. Olivia waited until most had dispersed before approaching. She scanned the board from bottom to top, a habit formed from years of expecting to find her name in the middle of the pack, respectable but never outstanding. But her name wasn't in the middle. It wasn't even in the top 10. Sergeant Olivia Morgan was listed at position 3, behind only Staff Sergeant Miller and a Force Recon Marine from Team Bravo. "Congratulations, Sergeant," Master Sergeant Wilson said from behind her. "You've made an impression." Olivia turned to find not only Wilson, but also the rest of Team Delta staring at the board in various states of disbelief. Peterson was at position 12, Hayes at 8, and Ramirez at 15. "Thank you, Master Sergeant," she replied, maintaining her professional demeanor despite the surge of satisfaction. Peterson's face had reddened. "With all due respect, Master Sergeant, the M4 is a forgiving platform. Tomorrow's a different story. The M110 requires upper body strength to manage recoil over extended periods." "Are you suggesting the scores are inaccurate, Gunnery Sergeant?" Peterson backpedaled immediately. "No, Master Sergeant, just pointing out that different platforms favor different physical attributes." "In my experience," Wilson replied coldly, "excuses are made by those who fear they can't perform." He turned to Olivia. "Sergeant Morgan, I expect the same level of precision tomorrow." "Yes, Master Sergeant." As Wilson walked away, Olivia felt the atmosphere around her shift. What had been dismissive amusement this morning had transformed into something closer to resentment. She was no longer a joke. She was a threat. "Lucky day, Morgan," Peterson muttered as he shouldered past her. "Enjoy it while it lasts." Hayes studied her with new calculation in his eyes. "Where'd you learn to shoot like that, Sergeant?" "My grandfather taught me the basics when I was 8. The Army refined it." "Your grandfather?" Ramirez asked. "Marine Corps Scout Sniper, Vietnam. He believed marksmanship was about precision, not power." She met their gazes evenly. He also believed size was irrelevant behind a trigger. Staff Sergeant Miller, who had maintained his distance from the team dynamics all day, approached her as the others dispersed. His top ranking on the leaderboard had surprised no one. His reputation as a shooter was legendary in special operations circles. "Your breathing technique is interesting," he said without preamble. 4-count inhale, 6-count hold, 4-count exhale, not standard military instruction. Olivia nodded. "Adapted from competitive biathlon shooting. Lowers heart rate more effectively in high-stress situations." Miller considered this. "Your stance on the unstable platform stage, wider than doctrine recommends. Lower center of gravity compensates for my height disadvantage, sacrifices some mobility for stability." For the first time, Miller's expression showed something other than professional neutrality, a glimmer of respect. Most shooters try to overcome physical limitations with strength. You've adapted technique instead. "Work with what you have," Olivia replied. Miller nodded once. "The team could learn from your approach, if they're willing to listen." As she walked back to her quarters that evening, Olivia felt the weight of the day settling into her muscles. The physical demands had been substantial, but the mental strain of constantly proving herself was even more taxing. Still, she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Day 1 had gone exactly as she'd planned. In her room, she reviewed her notes on the M110 sniper system.
Tomorrow would indeed be more challenging. The semi-automatic sniper rifle was heavier, with significant recoil, especially during rapid follow-up shots. Peterson wasn't entirely wrong. Physical strength did matter when maintaining precision with such a weapon over an extended period. But Olivia had prepared for this. While others relied on brute strength, she had developed alternative techniques, using bone support rather than muscle tension, perfecting her position to distribute the weapon's weight more efficiently, and employing specialized breathing patterns to manage recoil anticipation. As she made her final preparations for the next day, her phone buzzed with a text message from a number she didn't recognize. Team Delta, 2100 hours, Recreation Hall. Mandatory meeting. When she arrived at the Recreation Hall, the rest of Team Delta was already waiting. Peterson paced near the pool table, while Hayes and Ramirez sat reviewing notes. Miller stood slightly apart, observing.
"Now that we're all here," Peterson began, his tone making it clear who they had been waiting for, "we need to discuss team strategy." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "I wasn't aware this was a team competition, Gunny." "It's not," Peterson acknowledged, "but teams that perform well collectively get noticed. Commands look at group averages when selecting units for joint operations." "What Peterson is trying to say," Hayes interjected, "is that we all benefit if Team Delta outperforms the other teams, even if we're competing against each other individually." Ramirez nodded. "There's a lot of brass watching this competition. Career-making visibility." Olivia understood the unspoken message. They needed her to perform well to elevate the team average, despite their initial dismissal of her capabilities. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked. Peterson stopped pacing. "Information sharing. You've clearly got some techniques that work. We've all got experience you don't. Everyone benefits." It was a reasonable proposal on the surface, but Olivia detected the underlying calculation. They wanted her knowledge without offering much in return. "I'm open to collaboration," she said carefully, "but it needs to be equitable." "Meaning?" Hayes asked. "I'll share my approach to the M110 tomorrow if each of you shares your specialty. Peterson, I've seen your rapid target acquisition technique. It's impressive. Hayes, your malfunction clearance is the fastest I've observed. Ramirez, your sight picture acquisition in low light conditions is exceptional. Miller," she nodded to the quiet staff sergeant, "your wind reading is unmatched." Her detailed observations of their shooting styles caught them off guard. They hadn't realized she'd been studying them as carefully as they were now studying her. "That's specific," Ramirez said, clearly reassessing her. Peterson laughed, but there was less derision in it than before. "You've been taking notes on us, Mighty Mouse?" "I take notes on everyone," Olivia replied simply. "It's how I learn." Miller, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward. "Morgan's proposition is fair. We all have strengths. Sharing them improves the team." The dynamic in the room shifted. What had started as an attempt to extract information from the unexpected top performer had transformed into something closer to genuine collaboration. For the next hour, they exchanged techniques and insights. Despite their initial skepticism, Olivia's detailed knowledge of ballistics and weapon mechanics quickly earned their grudging respect. By the time they disbanded for the night, Team Delta had developed a new cohesion, still competitive, but with a baseline of professional respect that hadn't existed that morning. As Olivia left the recreation hall, Miller fell into step beside her. "They underestimated you," he said. "Most people do, I imagine." "It happens." "It won't happen again." Olivia smiled slightly. "Yes, it will, but less frequently here than elsewhere." Miller nodded in understanding. "Get some rest, Morgan. Tomorrow's going to be a trial by fire." As Olivia walked back to her quarters under a sky filled with stars, she reflected on the day's events. She hadn't come to the Precision Response Program to make friends or gain acceptance. She'd come to prove, to herself more than anyone, that exceptional performance transcended physical limitations. Day one had been a beginning. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new doubts to overcome, new opportunities to excel. But for the first time in her career, Olivia felt something unfamiliar taking root alongside her determination.
the sense that she had found where she belonged. In a world that often confused strength with size and confused confidence with competence, she had carved out a space where the only thing that truly mattered was the consistency with which she could put rounds on target. And in that space, Olivia Morgan was exactly where she was meant to be. Dawn broke over Fort Benning with the promise of another punishing Georgia summer day. Olivia rose from a fitful sleep at 03:30, her body already anticipating the challenges ahead. The M110 semi-automatic sniper system waited for her today, a precision instrument that many considered impossible for someone of her size to control effectively. She began her morning with a ritual of stretching and targeted exercises focused on her core and shoulders. While others relied on raw strength, Olivia had developed a different approach: stability through proper alignment and technique rather than muscle mass. The firing range was shrouded in pre-dawn mist when she arrived at 04:15. To her surprise, she wasn't the first one there. Staff Sergeant Miller was already in position, his silhouette barely visible through the fog as he dry-fired his weapon, practicing the mechanics without ammunition.
"Morning, Morgan," he said, without looking up as she approached. "Miller," she acknowledged, setting up at the position next to him. They worked in companionable silence for nearly 40 minutes, each focused on their own preparation. Miller occasionally glanced over, observing her technique with professional curiosity. "You're compensating for the weight distribution differently than standard doctrine," he finally commented. Olivia nodded. "The M110's balance point is 2.3 inches forward of the magazine well. Most shooters try to muscle it into stability. I'm using skeletal support instead, bone structure rather than muscle tension." Miller considered this. "Smart. Muscles fatigue. Bones don't." "Exactly. I can maintain position longer with less drift." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the rest of Team Delta. Captain Ramirez nodded a greeting, his earlier skepticism replaced by cautious respect. Lieutenant Commander Hayes acknowledged her with a slight tip of his chin, not quite acceptance, but no longer dismissal either. Only Gunnery Sergeant Peterson maintained his overt skepticism. "Ready for a real challenge today, Morgan? Hitting paper targets with an M4 is one thing. Long-range precision with a heavy platform is something else entirely." Olivia kept her expression neutral. "Looking forward to it, Gunny." The morning briefing was conducted by a weathered master gunnery sergeant with silver hair and a face marked with sun-etched lines. Master Guns Martinez was a legend in sniper circles, 30 years of service, 14 as an instructor at the Scout Sniper Basic Course. "Today separates the precision shooters from the spray and pray crowd," he announced without preamble. "The M110 demands respect. It demands attention to detail. It will expose every flaw in your technique." He gestured to the range behind him, where targets had been set up at varying distances from 300 to 800 meters. 5 stages today: precision fire at known distances, unknown distance estimation and engagement, multiple target acquisition, stress fire after physical exertion, and low-light, limited visibility operations this evening. Martinez's eyes swept the assembled shooters. "Half of you will be eliminated by dinner. This is where we find out who really understands ballistics and who's been getting by on muscle memory and luck." As the shooters moved to their assigned positions, Olivia felt the familiar knot of tension between her shoulder blades. The M110 was indeed substantially heavier than the M4, a challenge for someone her size. But she'd trained for this, developed techniques specifically to overcome the physical disadvantage. Stage 1 began with basic qualification at known distances. Straightforward shots that any competent marksman could make, designed to establish a baseline. Olivia settled into her position, focusing on bone support rather than muscle tension, letting her skeletal structure bear the weight of the rifle. "Shooters, ready?" Martinez called. "Fire when ready. 10 rounds at the 300-meter target." The range erupted with the controlled rhythm of semi-automatic fire. Olivia took her time, establishing her natural point of aim before firing her first shot. Each subsequent round followed a precise pattern: exhale, squeeze, absorb recoil, reset, inhale. The M110 bucked against her shoulder, but her position absorbed the energy efficiently, allowing her to reacquire her sight picture quickly. When ceasefire was called, range officers moved down range to check targets.
Around her, other shooters were comparing notes, some looking satisfied, others frustrated. Peterson, 3 positions away, was explaining loudly to Hayes how his grouping was affected by a crosswind that came out of nowhere. The range officers returned, and scores were posted for the first stage. Olivia had placed 4th, not as high as yesterday, but still comfortably in the top tier. Miller had taken 1st place, demonstrating why his reputation as a precision shooter was well-deserved. "Not bad for a lightweight," Peterson conceded as they prepared for Stage 2. "But the real test is coming." Stage 2 introduced the element that separated casual marksmen from true precision shooters: unknown distance estimation. Targets were placed at unmarked distances between 400 and 700 meters. Shooters had to estimate range, calculate ballistic solutions on the fly, and engage effectively, all skills that required experience and judgment more than physical attributes. This was where Olivia's obsessive preparation gave her an advantage. She'd memorized the ballistic performance of the M110 at various distances, could calculate drop and drift instantly, and had developed a range estimation technique using known reference points that was accurate to within meters. When the scores were posted after Stage 2, Olivia had climbed to 2nd place, behind only Miller. Hayes had maintained his position in the top 10, while Ramirez had improved to 11th. Peterson had fallen to 17th, his strength-based shooting style beginning to falter as precision and technical knowledge became more critical. The midday sun beat down mercilessly as they broke for a 30-minute lunch. Olivia sat apart from the group, reviewing her notes for the afternoon stages while nibbling on an energy bar. She was surprised when Hayes approached, carrying an extra bottle of water. "Thought you might need this," he said, offering the water. "You're not sweating enough." Olivia accepted the bottle with a nod of thanks. Hayes wasn't wrong. In this heat, hydration was critical, especially for someone her size. "Your distance estimation is impressive," Hayes continued, sitting beside her. "Where'd you learn that technique? Doesn't look like standard military instruction." "Developed it myself, adapted from competitive shooting and integrated with military doctrine." Hayes nodded thoughtfully. "I've been watching your shooting style. You're using the rifle's physics against itself, creating a counterbalance system with your body position." "Most shooting techniques were designed for average-sized men. I had to find alternatives." "Well, it's working." Hayes stood to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, Morgan, I was wrong yesterday. Size clearly isn't everything in this game." It wasn't quite an apology, but Olivia recognized it as the professional acknowledgement it was intended to be. "Appreciate that, Commander." Stage 3 began immediately after lunch. Multiple target engagement. 5 targets appeared at different distances and positions, requiring rapid acquisition, quick ballistic calculations, and efficient transitions between firing positions. It tested not just accuracy, but adaptability and decision-making under time pressure. As Olivia moved through her sequence, she was aware of Master Sergeant Wilson observing from behind the firing line. His expression was unreadable, but his attention was fixed on her technique. She focused on her process: identify, range, calculate, position, fire, confirm, transition. Each step executed with precision born of thousands of repetitions. When she completed the stage, Wilson approached as she was clearing her weapon. "Your technique is unorthodox, Sergeant." "Yes, Master Sergeant, but effective." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Who trained you on long-range precision fire?" "Initially my grandfather, Master Sergeant. After joining the Army, I sought additional training from civilian competitive shooters and studied under Master Sergeant Fernandez at Benning." Wilson's eyebrows raised slightly. "Carlos Fernandez, the Carlos Fernandez who holds 3 Army marksmanship records?" "Yes, Master Sergeant. He was willing to work with me on developing adapted techniques." Wilson nodded slowly. "Fernandez doesn't waste time on shooters without potential." He studied her for another moment. "Carry on, Sergeant. You're representing his training well." The afternoon stretched into evening as Stage 4 tested the shooter's ability to maintain precision after physical stress. The course required running 800 meters with full kit, immediately followed by engaging targets from unstable positions. It was designed to simulate combat conditions, elevated heart rate, oxygen debt, muscle fatigue, and psychological pressure. This stage favored the physically stronger competitors, and Olivia knew it would be her greatest challenge. While she had excellent cardio conditioning, the weight of the gear relative to her body weight put her at a disadvantage. She would be proportionately more taxed than her larger counterparts. As she prepared for her run, Peterson approached. His earlier dismissive attitude had been tempered by her performance, replaced by something closer to competitive respect. "This stage is going to be rough on you, Morgan. Don't try to match pace with the bigger guys. Find your sustainable rhythm." Olivia was surprised by the advice. "Thanks, Gunny." "Don't get too comfortable," Peterson added with a hint of his earlier swagger. "I'm still going to smoke you on this one." When her turn came, Olivia approached the course with calculated determination. Rather than trying to match the sprint pace of the larger men, she maintained a steady, efficient rhythm that minimized wasted energy. Her breathing remained controlled, her movements economical. By the time she reached the firing position, her heart rate was elevated but not pounding, her hands steady enough for precision work. She settled behind the M110, using her specialized technique to establish stability despite her fatigue. Each shot required absolute focus, fighting through the burn in her muscles, the demand for oxygen, the sweat threatening to blur her vision. When she completed the stage, Master Guns Martinez was waiting. "Time and accuracy scores," he announced, loud enough for nearby shooters to hear. Morgan finishes stage 4 with the third-best combined score. Efficiency of movement compensated for raw speed. Peterson had indeed outperformed her on this stage, taking first place with a combination of impressive speed and remarkably accurate fire despite his exertion. He caught her eye across the range and gave a small nod, acknowledgement from one professional to another. By the time Stage 5 began, night had fallen over the Georgia landscape. The final challenge involved engaging targets under limited visibility conditions using night optics. Success required not just technical proficiency with the equipment, but also patience, discipline, and almost intuitive understanding of ballistic principles when visual references were limited. Olivia excelled in these conditions. Her methodical approach and reliance on process rather than visual confirmation played to her strengths. Where others tried to see their shots, she trusted her calculations and position. As the final scores were tallied, Master Sergeant Wilson addressed the remaining shooters, now reduced to 24 from the original 32. "Day 2 separates technical shooters from instinctive shooters," he said. "Some of you rely on feel and natural ability, others on precision and calculation. The best combine both approaches." His eyes found Olivia in the group. "Tomorrow we move to the MK-48 machine gun, a completely different skill set, different physics, different application of force. Study your manuals, be ready at 0600. The leaderboard showed Olivia in second place overall after 2 days, behind only Staff Sergeant Miller, whose consistency across all platforms was remarkable. Peterson had recovered to 8th place, while Hayes and Ramirez held steady in the top 15. As the competitors dispersed toward their quarters, exhausted after a 14-hour day, Ramirez fell into step beside Olivia. "Team Delta's holding its own," he observed. "2 in the top 10, all of us still in the competition." Olivia nodded. "Strong showing." "Listen, Morgan," Ramirez said, lowering his voice. "Word's spreading about your performance. You've got people's attention now, and not all of it's positive." "Meaning?" "Some of the eliminated shooters are saying your scores can't be legitimate, that the instructors must be giving you special treatment because—" He hesitated. "Because I'm a woman," Olivia finished flatly. "Yeah." Ramirez looked uncomfortable. "It's bullshit, obviously. Anyone who's actually watched you shoot knows better. But some guys need excuses when their egos get bruised. Not the first time, won't be the last. Just thought you should know, these competitions get political sometimes." She appreciated the warning, even if it wasn't surprising. "Thanks, Captain." "One more thing," as they approached her quarters. "Team meeting tonight, 2200 hours, Miller's idea." The recreation hall was quieter tonight. Many of the competitors had either been eliminated or were too exhausted for socializing. Team Delta had claimed a corner table where Miller was already laying out diagrams of the MK-48 machine gun's operating system. "Morgan," he acknowledged as she arrived. "Good timing. We're discussing tomorrow's approach." The dynamic had shifted noticeably. Where yesterday's meeting had been an awkward attempt to extract information from her, Tonight felt like genuine collaboration among professionals. Even Peterson's attitude had evolved from condescension to competitive respect. The MK-48 is going to be challenging for all of us, Miller began. None of us specialize in crew-served weapons, but the principles of fire control still apply. For the next hour, they discussed techniques for managing the substantially heavier machine gun, with its higher rate of fire and different recoil pattern. Peterson, who had the most experience with the platform, offered valuable insights on controlling barrel rise during sustained fire. Morgan's going to have the toughest time with weight management, he observed, but without his earlier dismissiveness. The MK-48 is nearly 30 pounds fully loaded. I've been working on a modified technique, using stance and position to manage the weight rather than upper body strength.
She demonstrated her approach using a chair as a prop, showing how she planned to distribute the weapon's weight through her core rather than her shoulders and arms. Hayes studied her demonstration with professional interest. That could actually work better than the standard position. Lower center of gravity means less barrel rise. Exactly, Olivia confirmed. What I sacrifice in mobility, I gain in stability. They continued their technical discussion, each contributing their specialized knowledge. By the time they disbanded for the night, Team Delta had developed a comprehensive approach to the next day's challenges, drawing on each member's strengths. As Olivia left the recreation hall, Miller once again fell into step beside her. "You've changed the dynamic of this team," he observed, "in ways I didn't anticipate." "How so?" "We're actually functioning as a unit now, not just 5 competitors who happen to share a designation." Miller was quiet for a moment before continuing. "You forced everyone to reconsider their assumptions about what makes an effective shooter." Olivia considered this. "That wasn't my intention." "Intentions rarely matter as much as results," Miller replied. "And the result is that Team Delta is outperforming every other group because we're learning from each other instead of just trying to prove who's best." They walked in silence for a moment before Miller spoke again. "There's something you should know. After tomorrow's elimination, the remaining competitors will face a special challenge on day 4. It's not in the official brief." Olivia glanced at him sharply. "What kind of challenge?" "Unknown weapons," Miller said. "They'll give us platforms we've never handled before and expect us to become proficient enough to qualify within hours." "How do you know this?" "I've been through this program before," Miller admitted. "Made it to the final day but didn't qualify for the team. The unknown weapon stage is where I failed." Olivia processed this information. "Why are you telling me this?" Miller stopped walking and turned to face her. "Because you deserve a fair shot. And because your approach to shooting, adapting technique to the weapon's physics rather than forcing the weapon to conform to standard technique, is exactly what's needed for that challenge." It was perhaps the highest professional compliment she had ever received. "Thank you." Miller nodded once. "Get some rest, Morgan. Tomorrow won't be easy, but I have a feeling day 4 is where you'll really shine." As Olivia continued to her quarters alone, she reflected on how dramatically the situation had changed in just 2 days. She had arrived as an outsider, dismissed and underestimated by her peers. Now she had earned a place at the table through nothing but pure performance. Yet she knew the hardest challenges still lay ahead. The MK-48 would indeed test her physical limits. And beyond that, if Miller was right, lay a test designed to separate adaptable shooters from those who relied on familiar patterns. In her room, she reviewed her notes on machine gun operation until her eyes grew too heavy to continue. As she drifted toward sleep, Olivia reminded herself why she had come to this competition in the first place. Not for recognition, not for acceptance, but to prove that excellence in her craft transcended physical limitations, that precision and technique could overcome any obstacle. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new doubts to overcome, new opportunities to excel. But for tonight, she had earned her place, and in a profession where performance was the only true currency, That was all that mattered. The morning dawned with a heavy mist hanging over Fort Benning. Olivia awoke with the first hints of light slipping through her window, her body aching from the previous day's exertions. The Mk-48 machine gun waited for her today, a beast of a weapon that would push her physical limits to their breaking point. As she stretched out the knots in her shoulders, Olivia reminded herself that today wasn't about raw strength. It was about physics, leverage, and technique. The principles that had guided her throughout her career would serve her now, even with a weapon that weighed nearly as much as a small child. At 0445, she arrived at the range to find an unexpected scene. The rest of Team Delta was already there, setting up a practice station with sandbags, bipods, and shooting platforms. "Morning, Morgan," Ramirez greeted her. "We thought you might want to do some pre-stage practice with the weapon." Peterson gestured to an Mk-48 set up on a tripod. "This one's been cleared for dry fire. Thought you might want to get a feel for the ergonomics before we go live." Olivia was momentarily taken aback by the gesture.
These men who had initially dismissed her were now actively supporting her preparation. It wasn't charity. They had recognized that her success contributed to the team's overall standing. "Appreciated," she said simply, moving to examine the machine gun. The Mk-48 was indeed a formidable piece of equipment, nearly 26 pounds unloaded, with a design optimized for sustained fire rather than precision shooting. It was a squad support weapon, meant to be operated primarily from stable positions or with a team. "I've been thinking about your stance from yesterday," Hayes said, approaching as she familiarized herself with the weapon's controls. "You might want to try this." He demonstrated a modified kneeling position that incorporated elements of her technique with adjustments for the weapon's different balance point. "The key is managing the recoil pattern," Peterson added, joining them. "This isn't a precision rifle. It's designed for area suppression, but they'll judge us on target discrimination and fire control." Miller observed from a few feet away, a slight smile playing at the corner of his mouth. The team dynamic had evolved into something none of them had anticipated. 5 highly competitive individuals who had found value in collaboration. For the next 45 minutes, they worked together, each contributing their expertise. Olivia practiced mounting the weapon, establishing her firing position, and cycling through the weapon's functions. By the time Master Sergeant Wilson arrived to begin the day's briefing, she had developed a technique that played to her strengths while acknowledging the weapon's design. "Morning, shooters," Wilson announced as the full complement of competitors assembled. "Day 3 is about controlled aggression. The Mk-48 is not a surgeon's scalpel, it's a sledgehammer. But a sledgehammer in skilled hands can be surprisingly precise." He gestured to the range, where complex target arrays had been set up at distances from 50 to 500 meters. 4 stages today: basic qualification, traversing fire with target discrimination, rapid response to emerging threats, and sustained fire under stress. We'll eliminate another 8 shooters by day's end. As they moved to their assigned positions, Olivia felt a new kind of confidence, not the quiet certainty she'd always carried, but something born of genuine respect from her peers, professionals who had seen her perform and recognized her skill. The first stage was straightforward: basic qualification with the Mk-48 from the prone position with bipod support. This minimized the weapon's weight issues, allowing Olivia to focus on sight alignment, trigger control, and breathing. When her turn came, she settled behind the weapon with practiced efficiency. The Mk-48's mechanical rhythms were different from the precision rifles she was accustomed to, but the fundamentals remained the same: establish position, control breathing, maintain sight picture, manage recoil. Her first burst of fire struck center mass on the target. She adjusted slightly and continued, maintaining a controlled rhythm that allowed the weapon to function as designed without sacrificing accuracy. When ceasefire was called, her target showed tight groupings that rivaled those of shooters twice her size. Master Guns Martinez examined her target with professional interest. "Clean technique, Morgan. You're letting the weapon do the work instead of fighting it. Good adjustment."
Stage 2 introduced complexity, traversing fire with target discrimination. Multiple targets appeared across a wide sector, some designated as threats, others as non-combatants. Shooters had to rapidly assess, engage legitimate targets, and avoid collateral damage. This was where Olivia's methodical approach paid dividends. While others sprayed fire across the range, she maintained disciplined bursts, systematically eliminating threats while preserving perfect target discrimination. When the scores were posted, she had placed third in the stage, behind Miller and, surprisingly, Ramirez, whose experience with close-quarters battle had translated well to the rapid target assessment. "Nice shootin', Morgan," Ramirez acknowledged. "Your trigger control is something else." "You too, sir. Your target transitions were textbook." Peterson overheard their exchange and shook his head with a rueful smile. "3 days ago, I wouldn't have believed the smallest person here would be top 3 with a crew-served weapon. Shows what I know." Stage 3 tested rapid response capabilities.
Shooters began with weapons dismounted, then had to react to sudden threat presentations, mounting the weapon, acquiring targets, and delivering accurate fire in minimal time. This was where the weapon's weight created the greatest challenge for Olivia. While her larger counterparts could swing them MK-48 into position with brute strength, she had to rely on technique and leverage. Her movements were more deliberate, but no less effective. When her turn came, she executed with fluid precision. Each movement flowed into the next. Weapon mount, position establishment, target acquisition, controlled fire. What she lacked in raw speed, she made up for in the efficiency of movement and accuracy of fire. Morgan completes Stage 3 with the 5th best time and 2nd best accuracy, Wilson announced. Effective application of technique compensating for physical limitations. By midday, the Georgia's sun had turned the range into a furnace. Sweat soaked through Olivia's uniform as she prepared for Stage 4, the most physically demanding challenge of the day. Sustained fire under stress required shooters to maintain accurate fire on multiple targets while dealing with induced weapon malfunctions, physical obstacles, and ammunition transitions. As she waited for her turn, Miller approached. "This stage is going to test your endurance," he said quietly. "Don't try to match our pace. Find your sustainable rhythm and stick to it." Olivia nodded, grateful for the advice, but already formulating her approach. When her turn came, she moved to the firing position with calculated determination. The course required traversing 100 meters with the weapon, establishing firing positions at 3 different points, managing induced malfunctions, and maintaining accurate fire throughout. For someone her size, the physical toll was enormous, the MK-48 seeming to grow heavier with each step. But Olivia had prepared for this. She used momentum and body mechanics to move the weapon efficiently, conserving energy for critical moments. When a malfunction was induced, she cleared it with practiced motions that relied on technique rather than strength. By the final firing position, her muscles were burning with fatigue, but her mind remained clear. She delivered her final bursts with the same precision as her first, refusing to let physical discomfort compromise her performance. When she completed the course, Master Sergeant Wilson was waiting. "Time and accuracy assessment," he announced. "Morgan finishes with a combined score in the top quartile. Impressive management of physical resources." As Olivia caught her breath, leaning on the now empty weapon, she felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Peterson. "That was one of the most technically perfect runs I've seen," he said with genuine admiration. "You just rewrote the manual on how to handle this weapon." Coming from the team's most experienced machine gunner, it was high praise indeed. Olivia simply nodded, too exhausted for words, but deeply satisfied with her performance. The final scores for Day 3 showed Miller maintaining his overall lead, with Olivia now in 3rd place. Hayes had narrowly edged ahead of her with a spectacular performance in the final stage. Peterson and Ramirez remained solidly in the top 15. Team Delta, Wilson announced, is the only team with all members still in the competition. That speaks to either exceptional individual talent or effective collaboration, perhaps both. As the competitors dispersed for the evening, Olivia felt the cumulative fatigue of 3 intensive days settling into her body. Every muscle ached, her shoulders burned from supporting the heavy weapon, and her hands were raw despite her gloves. She was heading toward her quarters when a voice called her name. Turning, she saw Master Gunnery Sergeant Martinez approaching. "A word, Morgan," he said, gesturing for her to follow. They walked in silence to the instructor's building, a simple structure that served as headquarters for the range staff. Inside, Martinez led her to a small conference room where, to her surprise, several senior officers were waiting, including a full-bird colonel she didn't recognize. "Sergeant Morgan," the colonel greeted her, extending his hand. "I'm Colonel Barrett, Program Director for the Joint Special Operations Command Marksmanship Initiative. Please, have a seat." Olivia sat, suddenly alert despite her fatigue. Jayok's involvement suggested this was more than a routine competition. "You're probably wondering why we've asked you to here," Barrett continued.
The Precision Response Program isn't just a competition. It's a selection process for a new joint task force specializing in advanced marksmanship and weapons development. Martinez took up the explanation. "We've been watching you closely, Morgan. Your approach to adapting techniques for different weapons platforms is unconventional but extraordinarily effective." Barrett nodded. "Most of our shooting doctrine is developed by and for average-sized men. Your adaptations offer valuable insights that could benefit a wide range of operators." Olivia processed this information carefully. "Sir, I appreciate the interest, but I'm still in the middle of the competition. I haven't qualified for anything yet." "That's true," Barrett acknowledged, "and we're not offering you special treatment. You'll complete the program like everyone else. But regardless of the final outcome, we'd like you to consider a role in our Weapons Adaptation Research Unit." Martinez leaned forward. "In plain terms, Morgan, we want you to help us develop techniques for shooters who don't fit the standard physical profile. Smaller stature operators, those recovering from injuries, or those with unique physical characteristics." The offer was unexpected but intriguing. Throughout her career, Olivia had improvised solutions to overcome her physical limitations. The idea of formalizing those techniques, helping others facing similar challenges, appealed to her deeply. "I'd be interested, sir," she said carefully, "assuming I complete the program successfully." Barrett smiled. "That's all we ask for now. Focus on tomorrow's evolution. We'll talk details later." As she left the meeting, Olivia found Miller waiting outside, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. "Special meeting?" he asked, falling into step beside her. "Something like that," she replied, not ready to share details. Miller nodded, understanding her discretion. "Tomorrow's the unknown weapons stage. You ready?" "As I can be without knowing what to expect." "That's the point," Miller said. "They want to see how you adapt to unfamiliar systems without preparation. It's about core principles and adaptability." They walked in silence for a moment before Miller spoke again. "You've changed people's minds here, Morgan, not just about you personally, about what makes an effective shooter." Olivia considered this. "That wasn't my objective." "The best changes rarely come from trying to prove a point," Miller replied. "They come from simply excelling at what you do and letting the results speak for themselves." When they reached the recreation hall, the rest of Team Delta was already assembled, along with several competitors from other teams. The atmosphere was tense but collegial. After 3 days of intensive evaluation, a sense of shared experience had developed among those still in the competition. "Morgan," Hayes called her over, "we were just discussing tomorrow's stage." As she joined the group, Olivia noticed that the social dynamics had evolved significantly. Where once she had been an outsider, now she was sought out for her perspective. Peterson had even begun referring to her adapted techniques as the Morgan method when discussing shooting positions with competitors from other teams. "Word is they're bringing in exotic weapons tomorrow," Ramirez said as she sat down. "Foreign military platforms, prototype systems, even historical pieces. The point is to test fundamental understanding of firearm physics," added Miller. "If you understand how weapons function at a mechanical level, you can adapt to anything." Peterson nudged Olivia's shoulder. "Should play right into your wheelhouse, Morgan. You've been adapting to non-standard situations this entire time." The conversation continued late into the evening, with competitors sharing experiences and techniques. As the group finally began to disperse, Hayes pulled Olivia aside. "Morgan, I owe you an apology.
I made assumptions about your capabilities based on nothing but physical appearance. That was unprofessional and frankly stupid. Olivia had never expected such a direct acknowledgement. Appreciate that, Commander, but it's nothing I haven't dealt with before. That's the problem, Hayes replied. People like me have been putting obstacles in your way that never should have been there. You shouldn't have had to work twice as hard just to get the same respect. His candor was surprising, but welcome. True enough, but the work made me better. Hayes considered this. Maybe, but imagine what you could have accomplished if you'd been able to focus all that energy on excellence rather than overcoming bias.
It was a perspective Olivia hadn't often considered, the opportunity cost of constantly having to prove herself before being taken seriously. Something to think about, she acknowledged. But for now, I'm focused on tomorrow. When she finally returned to her quarters, Olivia found a package outside her door. Inside was a custom shooting journal with a note from Master Guns Martinez. For recording your adaptations, the Corps could use this knowledge. The gesture reinforced what the earlier meeting had suggested. Her techniques weren't just personal solutions, but potentially valuable contributions to military doctrine. As she prepared for bed, Olivia reflected on how dramatically her standing had changed in just 3 days. She had arrived as an anomaly, a curiosity at best. Now she was being sought out for her expertise, her adaptations studied and emulated by elite operators. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, unfamiliar weapons that would test the limits of her adaptability. But for the first time in her career, she would face those challenges with the full respect of her peers and the confidence that came from knowing her approach had been vindicated in the most demanding circumstances. She fell asleep with the satisfaction of someone who had not just proven herself, but had expanded the possibilities for others who might follow her path. Shooters who didn't fit the physical profile, but could excel through technique, knowledge, and determination. Day 4 dawned with a sense of anticipation that permeated the entire training compound. The remaining 16 competitors gathered at the range to find it completely transformed. Gone were the familiar rifle racks and standard targets. Instead, a series of stations had been set up, each featuring a weapon system that looked distinctly unfamiliar. Master Sergeant Wilson addressed the assembled shooters. Today tests your fundamental understanding of firearms. Each station features a weapon you've likely never handled, some foreign military, some experimental, some historical. You'll have 30 minutes to familiarize yourself with each platform before qualification. He gestured to the first station. You'll rotate through all 8 stations by day's end. Scoring is based on how quickly you adapt and how accurately you employ each weapon. This stage typically eliminates half the remaining field. The competitors exchanged glances, a mixture of apprehension and excitement evident on their faces. This was where pure shooting skill transcended platform familiarity, where fundamental understanding mattered more than specific training. Team Delta will begin at stations 1 through 5. Team Bravo at stations 6 through 8. Rotation begins in 15 minutes. Study the weapons, understand their mechanics, and adapt your technique accordingly. As Olivia approached her first station, she found herself facing a bullpup rifle with unusual controls and a complex optical system. The station instructor provided basic safety information and operating parameters, but nothing more. The competitors were expected to figure out the rest. She began by examining the weapon's balance point, trigger mechanism, and recoil characteristics. Instead of trying to force familiar techniques onto the unfamiliar platform, she let the weapon's design guide her approach, adapting her position, grip, and sight alignment to its unique characteristics. When it came time to fire the qualification course, Olivia's methodical approach paid dividends. While others struggled with the weapon's unfamiliar ergonomics, she delivered controlled, accurate fire that reflected her understanding of its fundamental mechanics. Morgan completes Station 1 with the second highest score, effective adaptation to platform characteristics. The day continued in this fashion, each station presenting a new challenge that tested not just shooting skill, but adaptivity and mechanical understanding. A heavy anti-material rifle at Station 2,
a foreign submachine gun with unusual recoil characteristics at Station 3, a historical battle rifle with primitive sights at Station 4. By midday, a clear pattern had emerged. The shooters who relied heavily on muscle memory and platform-specific training were struggling, while those with deeper understanding of firearms fundamentals were thriving. Miller maintained his consistent excellence, Hayes excelled with the precision platforms, and Peterson showed surprising adaptivity with the crew-served weapons.
But it was Olivia who emerged as the standout performer. Her career-long focus on adapting techniques to overcome physical limitations had given her an unparalleled ability to analyze and adjust to unfamiliar weapons. Where others tried to impose their preferred techniques, she let each weapon dictate the approach. Morgan's performance on the foreign weapons qualification is exceptional, Wilson commented to Martinez as they observed from the control tower. She's not fighting the platforms, she's working with them. Martinez nodded. It's exactly what Colonel Barrett was talking about. She understands the physics in a way most shooters never develop, because she's had to. By late afternoon, as they rotated to the final stations, fatigue was beginning to affect performance. 4 days of intensive shooting had taken a physical toll on even the most conditioned competitors. But the mental fatigue was perhaps more significant. The constant adaptation and problem-solving demanded complete focus. Olivia's final station presented perhaps the most unusual challenge of the day. An experimental caseless ammunition system with electronic firing controls and an integrated fire control computer. It was unlike anything in the conventional arsenal, requiring a fundamental rethinking of marksmanship principles. As she examined the weapon, Olivia felt a tap on her shoulder. It was Peterson. "This thing is a beast," he said quietly. "The recoil impulse is completely different from conventional systems. It's throwing everyone off." "Thanks for the heads up," Olivia replied, grateful for the insight. "You've got this, Morgan," Peterson added. "If anyone can figure out this space gun, it's you." His confidence, from the very person who had initially dismissed her, was perhaps the clearest indicator of how completely perceptions had changed. Olivia approached the experimental weapon with methodical curiosity. Rather than applying conventional techniques, she analyzed its unique characteristics and developed an approach tailored to its design. The electronic trigger required different pressure application, the recoil pattern demanded a modified stance, and the optical system functioned unlike any conventional sight. When she completed the qualification course, the range officer checked her score with evident surprise. "Morgan sets a new record for Station 8. Perfect score with the XM5 prototype." As the day's final scores were tallied, Master Sergeant Wilson called the remaining competitors together. Fatigue was evident on every face, but so too was the satisfaction of having met an extraordinary challenge. "Today's stage eliminated 8 shooters," Wilson announced. "The remaining 8 of you have demonstrated exceptional adaptability and fundamental understanding of firearms mechanics. Tomorrow's final stage will determine the 4 who qualify for the Precision Response Team." The leaderboard showed Miller still in first place overall, but Olivia had closed the gap significantly, now securely in second. Hayes held third, with Peterson having climbed to fourth after an exceptional performance on the crew-served weapon stations. Ramirez remained in contention at 7th place. "Team Delta," Wilson noted, "remains the only team with all members still in the competition, an unprecedented achievement in this program." As the competitors dispersed for the evening, Olivia found herself surrounded by shooters from other teams, all asking questions about her approach to the unfamiliar weapons. She answered patiently, sharing insights that had taken years to develop. "You've become the resident expert," Miller observed as they finally broke away from the group. "Not bad for someone who wasn't even taken seriously 4 days ago." Olivia smiled slightly. "Amazing what happens when performance is the only metric that matters." Miller nodded thoughtfully. "That's the thing about shooting. The target doesn't care who's behind the trigger. It only registers hits and misses. If only the rest of life worked that way." "Maybe it does more than we realize," Miller said. "People might start with biases, but most can recognize excellence when it's consistently demonstrated." As they walked back toward their quarters, Olivia reflected on the journey of the past 4 days. She had arrived expecting to fight for every scrap of respect,
to overcome skepticism at every turn. What she hadn't anticipated was how completely her performance would not just change how others saw her, but how they saw themselves and their own assumptions.
Tomorrow would bring the final challenge, a comprehensive test that would incorporate everything they had learned. But regardless of the outcome, Olivia had already achieved something more significant than a place on the team. She had demonstrated that excellence transcended physical limitations, that technique and understanding could overcome any obstacle. In a world that often confused strength with size and confused confidence with competence, she had carved out a space where performance was the only currency that mattered. And in that space, Sergeant Olivia Morgan had proven herself beyond any doubt. The final day of the Precision Response Program dawned clear and crisp, the Georgia air carrying the first hint of autumn. Olivia woke before her alarm, her mind already cycling through the possibilities for the day's challenges. The competition had narrowed to 8 shooters, the elite of the elite, and today would determine which 4 would join the Precision Response team. She moved through her morning routine with practiced efficiency, her muscles still aching from 4 intensive days of shooting, but her mind sharp and focused. Whatever the final stage held, she was prepared to face it with the same methodical approach that had brought her this far. The competitors gathered at the main range at 0600 to find it completely transformed. Complex shooting stations had been constructed overnight, creating what appeared to be a comprehensive test of every skill they had demonstrated throughout the week. Colonel Barrett addressed them personally, his presence underlining the significance of the final day. "Gentlemen, lady," he nodded toward Olivia, "you represent the top 0.25% of military shooters. Today's evolution is designed to identify those with the complete package. Not just technical skill, but judgment, adaptability, and decision-making under stress." He gestured to the course behind him. "The final stage is a comprehensive tactical problem. You'll move through 12 stations, each requiring different weapons, different positions, and different decision-making parameters. You'll be evaluated not just on accuracy, but on weapon selection, ammunition management, and tactical judgment." Master Sergeant Wilson took over the briefing. "You'll have access to every weapon platform you've used this week, plus additional options. Selecting the right tool for each engagement is part of the test. You'll be wearing full tactical gear, including plate carriers, and you'll be facing time pressure, physical obstacles, and environmental challenges." Martinez added the final details. "The course will take approximately 2 hours to complete. You'll be started at 15-minute intervals and scored individually. Team Delta, as the top-performing unit, will go last, giving you the advantage of maximum course preparation time." As Team Bravo's shooters prepared to begin the course, Team Delta gathered to develop their approach. The dynamic between them had evolved into something remarkable. 5 highly competitive individuals who had found value in collaboration while maintaining their edge. "The key is weapon selection," Miller observed as they studied the course layout. "Using the right platform for each engagement will be more important than pure shooting skill." Hayes nodded. "And managing physical resources. 2 hours in full kit is going to tax everyone's endurance." "Morgan's got an advantage there," Peterson noted, without a hint of his earlier dismissiveness. "Lower body mass relative to cardiovascular capacity means better endurance over time, especially in this heat." Ramirez was focused on the tactical elements. "There are decision points built into the course, shoot, no-shoot scenarios, multiple target prioritization problems. That's where they'll separate the pure technicians from the tactical thinkers." For the next 2 hours, they observed as Team Bravo's shooters tackled the course, each managing impressive performances, but also revealing the extraordinary difficulty of the final stage. Physical fatigue, mental pressure, and the complexity of the tactical problems combined to create a truly elite challenge. When Team Alpha's turn came, they watched with even greater intensity, identifying the specific challenges at each station and refining their approach accordingly. Station 7 is the killer, Hayes observed as they watched the shooters struggle with a complex engagement requiring rapid transitions between 3 different weapons. Weapon selection and transition speed are critical there. Station 10 is where everyone's falling short on ammunition management, Miller added.
They're burning too many rounds early in the sequence. By the time Team Delta's turn approached, they had developed a comprehensive understanding of the course's challenges. As the lowest-ranked member of their team by a narrow margin, Ramirez would go first, followed by Peterson, Hayes, Miller, and finally, Olivia. "Morgan, you've got the advantage of seeing everyone's performance before you," Peterson said as they prepared. "Use it." Ramirez completed the course with a solid performance, demonstrating exceptional tactical decision-making, but struggling slightly with the long-range precision stages. Peterson followed with a tour de force on the crew-served weapon stations, but lost time on the movement phases. Hayes showed his Navy SEAL background with flawless execution of the shoot-no-shoot scenarios, but had difficulty with ammunition conservation. Miller's performance was, as expected, exceptional across all parameters, confirming why he had led the standings throughout the competition. But even he showed signs of fatigue in the final stations, his transitions slightly slower than his usual lightning pace. As Olivia prepared to begin the course, Master Sergeant Wilson approached her. "Morgan, you've surprised a lot of people this week, myself included." "Thank you, Master Sergeant." Wilson studied her for a moment. "Whatever happens in there, remember, you've already changed the way people think about what makes an effective shooter." It was perhaps the highest compliment she could have received from the stoic instructor. Olivia nodded, then moved to the starting position, her mind calm, her focus absolute. "Sergeant Morgan, final qualification stage begins on your mark." Olivia took a deep breath, centered herself, and stepped onto the course. The first 3 stations were relatively straightforward, testing basic marksmanship with standard service weapons from various positions. Olivia moved through them with efficient precision, neither rushing nor hesitating, each movement purposeful and controlled. Station 4 presented the first major challenge, a complex engagement requiring rapid transitions between a precision rifle and a sidearm as targets appeared at varying distances. Drawing on her observations of previous shooters, Olivia positioned herself to minimize movement between firing positions, conserving energy while maintaining accuracy. Station 4 complete. Morgan completes Station 4 with the second-best time and highest accuracy, the range officer noted as she moved to Station 5. The middle stations tested physical endurance and stress management, requiring shooters to complete demanding obstacles before engaging targets with elevated heart rates and oxygen debt. This was where larger competitors had struggled, their greater muscle mass requiring more oxygen and generating more fatigue. Olivia's smaller frame proved advantageous here, her cardiovascular efficiency allowing her to recover more quickly between exertions. She maintained her precision despite the physical demands, her breathing control and shooting fundamentals unaffected by the stress. Station 7, which Hayes had identified as the critical challenge, required complex weapon transitions under time pressure. Olivia had studied each previous shooter's approach, identifying the optimal sequence and positioning. She executed with methodical efficiency, her transitions smooth and deliberate, her target engagements precise. Station 7. Morgan sets a new course record for Station 7. The announcement came, causing observers to exchange surprised glances. Perfect target engagement with minimum ammunition expenditure. As she progressed through the course, Olivia felt a sense of flow developing, that rare state where physical action and mental processing become perfectly synchronized. Each decision came intuitively, each movement executed with precision born of thousands of hours of practice. Station 10, the ammunition management challenge that had caused problems for previous shooters, required engaging multiple target arrays with limited rounds. Where others had approached it as a speed challenge, Olivia recognized it as a precision problem. carefully selecting each shot to maximize effect with minimum expenditure. Station 10 complete. Morgan demonstrates exceptional ammunition discipline, 14 targets neutralized with 14 rounds. The final stations were designed to test shooters at their physical and mental limits, complex engagements after nearly 2 hours of intensive exertion.
This was where even the most skilled competitors had shown degradation in performance, their precision eroded by fatigue. But Olivia had been preparing for this moment her entire career. Every time she'd pushed through exhaustion during training, every time she'd maintained focus when others faltered, had built the mental and physical endurance for exactly this challenge. She completed the final engagement with the same precision as her first, her breathing controlled, her movements economical, her shot placement immaculate. As she cleared her final weapon and stepped off the course, Olivia was met with an unexpected sight. The entire cadre of instructors, competitors, and observers had gathered to witness her finish. The expression on their faces told her everything she needed to know before the scores were even announced. Colonel Barrett approached, extending his hand. "Sergeant Morgan, that was the most technically perfect run I've ever witnessed on this course." Master Guns Martinez added, "You just rewrote the manual on tactical shooting fundamentals." Peterson was the first of her teammates to reach her, his earlier skepticism completely transformed into genuine admiration. "That was beautiful, Morgan. Absolutely beautiful." As the official scores were calculated, Team Delta gathered around Olivia, their competitive spirit momentarily set aside in a recognition of what they had just witnessed. Each had performed exceptionally well, but they knew they had just seen something extraordinary. "Attention on deck," Wilson called, bringing the assembly to order as Colonel Barrett prepared to announce the final results. After 5 days of the most demanding marksmanship evaluation in the military, Barrett began, 4 shooters have qualified for the precision response team. He paused, surveying the assembled competitors. In 4th position, qualifying for the team, Captain Michael Ramirez, United States Army Special Forces. Ramirez stepped forward to receive his qualification badge, his performance in the final stage having elevated him past several higher-ranked competitors. In 3rd position, Lieutenant Commander Nathan Hayes, United States Navy SEAL Team 6. Hayes accepted his badge with the quiet professionalism that had characterized his approach throughout the competition. In 2nd position, Staff Sergeant David Miller, United States Marine Corps Force Recon. Miller stepped forward, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He had led the competition for 4 days, only to be surpassed at the very end. Yet there was no resentment in his expression, only professional respect. And in 1st position, establishing a new course record for the Precision Response Program, Sergeant Olivia Morgan, United States Army Rangers. A spontaneous cheer erupted from the assembled shooters, a rare display of emotion from these stoic professionals. As Olivia stepped forward to receive her badge, she caught sight of Peterson's face in the crowd. The man who had dismissed her so completely just 5 days earlier was now applauding with genuine enthusiasm. Colonel Barrett continued, "Gunnery Sergeant Peterson, while you placed 5th and will serve as the team alternate, your performance merits special recognition. Your demonstration of crew-served weapons proficiency was exceptional." Peterson accepted this with a nod, his disappointment at missing the cut tempered by the recognition of his specific excellence. After the formal presentations, as the competitors began to disperse, Olivia found herself surrounded by shooters seeking to understand her techniques, her approach, her perspective on marksmanship fundamentals. The Morgan method, someone called it, and the name stuck immediately. What had begun as personal adaptations to overcome physical limitations was now being recognized as a valuable contribution to shooting doctrine. Later that evening, as the newly formed Precision Response Team gathered for their first briefing, Colonel Barrett outlined their mission. "You 4 represent the pinnacle of military marksmanship, but the Precision Response Team isn't just about operational capability. You'll also serve as instructors, developers, and innovators, pushing the boundaries of what's possible in the field of tactical shooting." He turned to Olivia. Sergeant Morgan, based on your performance and unique perspective, you'll lead the Technical Development Division. Your task is to formalize your adaptations into teachable doctrine and develop new techniques for shooters facing non-standard challenges. The assignment was everything she could have hoped for, an opportunity to transform her personal solutions into institutional knowledge that could benefit countless others. As the briefing concluded, Miller fell into step beside her. "Technical Development Division Lead," he said with approval. "Couldn't have gone to anyone better." "Thanks," Olivia replied, still processing it all. "Don't," Miller advised. "You earned this through pure performance. Nothing else to process." They walked in companionable silence for a moment before Miller spoke again. "You know what the most impressive thing about your week was?" "What's that?" "You never tried to prove anyone wrong. You just focused on proving yourself right." It was a distinction Olivia hadn't consciously considered, but Miller had captured something essential about her approach. Throughout her career, she had never been motivated by proving skeptics wrong or challenging stereotypes. She had simply committed herself to excellence, allowing her performance to speak for itself. As they reached the officers' club, they found Peterson waiting outside. His expression was thoughtful, without the swagger that had characterized him earlier in the week. "Morgan," he said as they approached. "Got a minute?" "Sure, Gunny." Miller tactfully continued inside, leaving them alone. "I owe you an apology," Peterson began. "A real one, not just a casual acknowledgement. I made assumptions about your capabilities based on nothing but physical appearance. That was unprofessional and flat out wrong." Olivia had received several such apologies over the past few days, but Peterson's felt particularly significant given how dismissive he had been initially. "Appreciate that, Gunny, but it's water under the bridge now." "Maybe for you," Peterson said, "but I need to own this, because the assumptions I made about you, they're the same ones I might make about others, and that limits my effectiveness as a leader and as a Marine." His candor was striking, a level of self-reflection she hadn't expected from the confident Marine. "The thing is," he continued, "I've always prided myself on judging people by their actions, not their appearances. But this week showed me I wasn't living up to that standard." Olivia considered her response carefully. "We all have biases, Gunny. The question is what we do when they're exposed." Peterson nodded. "That's why I wanted to talk to you. Not just to apologize, but to learn. Because whatever you're doing, the way you've adapted techniques to work with your physical attributes rather than against them, that's something every shooter could benefit from." The request was genuine, free from the calculation that might have colored a similar conversation earlier in the week. "I'd be happy to work with you on it. The technical development role means I'll be formalizing a lot of these approaches anyway." "I'd appreciate that," Peterson replied. Then, with a hint of his usual humor, "Might as well learn from the best, right?" Inside the officers' club, they found the rest of the competitors engaged in the kind of relaxed camaraderie that only emerges after shared ordeal. The competitive tension had dissolved, replaced by mutual respect and professional fellowship. Hayes raised his glass as Olivia and Peterson joined the group. "To Sergeant Morgan, who taught us all that it's not the size of the shooter in the fight, but the precision of the shot placement that matters." Laughter and agreement followed the toast. Olivia accepted it with a smile, still somewhat uncomfortable with being the center of attention, but recognizing the genuine respect behind the gesture. As the evening progressed, the conversation turned to what each of them had learned during the intensive week. For some, it was technical insights about specific weapons platforms. For others, tactical approaches to complex engagement problems. But for many, the most valuable lesson had been about preconceptions and performance, how easily expertise could be overlooked when it didn't come in the expected package. "You know what I still don't understand?" one of Team Bravo's shooters asked Olivia. "How you maintain such consistent accuracy with the heavy platforms. Physics says you should have struggled with the recoil management." Physics is exactly why it worked, Olivia explained. Most shooting techniques are designed around fighting recoil with muscle tension. I developed approaches that work with the weapon's natural recoil pattern instead of against it. As she elaborated, other shooters gathered around, their professional curiosity overriding any remaining skepticism. The officers' club transformed into an impromptu classroom, with Olivia demonstrating positions and techniques using a chair as a prop. Miller watched from a few feet away, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. When Olivia caught his eye, he raised his glass in a silent toast, acknowledgement from one professional to another. Later, as the gathering began to disperse, Colonel Barrett approached Olivia. "Impressive display of knowledge sharing, Sergeant. You're already fulfilling your role as technical development lead." "Thank you, sir." Barrett studied her for a moment. "You know, when we designed this program, we were looking for exceptional shooters. What we found in you is something more valuable, someone who can translate exceptional skill into teachable knowledge." It was perhaps the highest professional compliment Olivia had ever received. Recognition not just of her performance, but of her potential to transform military marksmanship doctrine. "That's always been the goal, sir," she replied, "to understand the why behind the how." Barrett nodded approvingly. "The Precision Response Team begins official training next month. In the meantime, I want you to start documenting your techniques. We're calling it the Morgan method officially now. Might as well embrace it." As she left the officers' club that night, walking across the now familiar grounds of Fort Benning, Olivia reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had arrived as an outsider, dismissed and underestimated by her peers. She departed as not just an accepted member of the elite community, but as someone whose name would become synonymous with a new approach to marksmanship fundamentals. The night air carried the scent of Georgia pine and distant rain. Stars spread across the sky in patterns as familiar to her as ballistic tables and trajectory calculations. Somewhere in the distance, the muffled sound of range fire indicated that training continued, the eternal cycle of military preparation that never truly ceased. She had not come to the Precision Response Program to prove a point or challenge stereotypes. She had come to test herself against the best, to push her skills to their absolute limit in the company of elite professionals. The respect she had earned was not a prize to be claimed, but a natural consequence of excellence consistently demonstrated. In her quarters, Olivia began organizing her notes from the week, the foundation of what would become the formal documentation of her techniques. Each page represented years of adaptation, experimentation, and refinement, solutions developed out of necessity that would now become institutional knowledge. A knock at her door interrupted her work. She opened it to find Miller, Hayes, Ramirez, and Peterson waiting outside. "Team meeting. Figured we should start as we mean to go on." They gathered around her small desk, professional camaraderie having evolved into something approaching friendship. Each brought their specific expertise to the conversation. Miller's technical precision, Hayes' tactical acumen, Ramirez's operational experience, Peterson's practical knowledge of crew-served weapons. Together, they began mapping out the future of the Precision Response Team, not just as a tactical unit, but as a center for innovation in military marksmanship. And at the center of their planning was the Morgan method, an approach that recognized that excellence in shooting came not from conforming to standardized techniques, but from adapting fundamental principles to individual attributes. As midnight approached, their planning complete for the moment, the team prepared to disperse until their official activation the following month. "One last thing," Peterson said as they stood to leave. "I've been thinking about what we witnessed this week. About Morgan showing us all that size and strength matter less than technique and precision." He looked at Olivia with newfound respect. "That's a lesson that goes beyond shooting, isn't it?" Hayes nodded thoughtfully. "It applies to everything we do. Focus on fundamentals, adapt to circumstances, let performance speak for itself."
The Morgan method, Ramirez said with a smile, not just a shooting technique, a philosophy. Olivia had never thought of her approach in such broad terms, but she recognized the truth in their observations. What had begun as necessary adaptations had evolved into a comprehensive approach to excellence, one that valued precision over power, technique over tradition, and results over appearances. As her teammates departed, each expressing their appreciation for what they had learned from her throughout the week,
Olivia returned to her notes. The work ahead was substantial, formalizing years of personal adaptations into teachable doctrine, developing new techniques for shooters facing non-standard challenges, and helping to shape the future of military marksmanship. But for the first time in her career, she would undertake that work with the full respect of her peers and the confidence that came from knowing her approach had been vindicated at the highest levels. No longer would she need to prove herself before being taken seriously. Her performance had spoken more eloquently than any argument ever could. In a world that often confused strength with size and confidence with competence, Sergeant Olivia Morgan had carved out a space where the only currency that mattered was excellence consistently demonstrated. And in that space, she had found not just professional fulfillment, but a purpose larger than herself, transforming personal solutions into institutional knowledge that would benefit countless others facing similar challenges. The journey had not been easy. There had been obstacles at every turn, skepticism to overcome, biases to confront. But the satisfaction of having met those challenges through pure performance, of having let her skill speak for itself, made every struggle worthwhile. As she completed her notes for the evening, Olivia thought about all the shooters who would benefit from the Morgan method in the years to come, not just those of smaller stature like herself, but anyone seeking to optimize their approach based on individual attributes rather than standardized techniques. The legacy she was creating would extend far beyond her personal achievements, becoming part of the foundation of military marksmanship. It was, she realized, exactly where she was meant to be, not despite the challenges she had faced, but because of how she had overcome them. Every dismissive comment, every skeptical glance, every obstacle placed in her path had forced her to develop solutions that would now benefit others. What had begun as personal necessity had evolved into professional innovation, and what had once set her apart now made her essential. In that moment, Sergeant Olivia Morgan understood something profound about excellence. It wasn't about proving others wrong or demanding recognition. It was about proving yourself right, day after day, shot after shot, until your performance became impossible to ignore. And that, perhaps, was the most valuable lesson of all.